Hello, this is yet another discussion that we want to have in our lecture series in sociology. Today, we want to have a discussion on sociological theories. Theories is an important area in any field of study, and it is expected of scholars and students to have a fair grasp of theories, because theories help us, especially at research level, to conceptualize and interpret our study results. The discussion that we want to have today will focus on four principal areas. These are the meaning of sociological theories, the paradigms or perspectives that are dominant in sociology, the characteristics of a good theory, and the functions of theories. Indeed, we cannot insist for students and scholars to have a fair grasp of theories if they do not have useful functions or if they are not useful to scholars and researchers. It is an important discussion that I would want to urge all the listeners and the readers to pay serious and singular attention to it. Welcome to this very, very important discussion. We want to begin by looking at the meaning of theory and sociological theory in particular. The concept sociological theory refers to the conceptual frameworks that have been developed by sociologists and which sociologists use to understand, explain, and predict human behavior within the context of social structures, social systems, and social institutions. In other words, when you talk about sociological theories, we mean frameworks that sociologists use as a basis of interpreting or explaining phenomena that exist in society. Now, based on the scale and scope of issues that scholars and researchers may be called upon to explain, we can then divide sociological theories into two broad areas. We have what we call macro theories and micro sociological theories. Macro theories are theories that are used to explain large-scale relationships or broad questions. For instance, a researcher that is interested, say, to study efficiency in government, broadly in government, might find it useful to use macro theories because government is large, it is complex, and it has a lot of issues that requires a proper understanding. And in that case, we apply theories that allow us to understand and explain issues on a large scale basis, and that is macro theories. Micro theories are used when we're explaining issues that are small in nature and those that involve small relationships at group level or issue level. For instance, again, if we are to study efficiency, say in a government institution such as a university, then at that level, we might be required to use micro theories. This is because a university is just a small component of the wider complex that we call the government. And in that case, we need theories that can give us details. In that case, theories that are micro in nature are well suited to understand such issues. One other issue that I want to bring out at this stage is that sociological theories are embedded, or they're anchored in what we call paradigms. And by a paradigm, we simply mean philosophical frameworks that are used in a given discipline to formulate propositions or present key arguments or generalizations. In this context, there are three broad paradigms that sociologists use or apply when they want to explain or interpret phenomena in society. These paradigms are conflict paradigm, functionalism paradigm, sometimes called structural functionalism, and then symbolic interactionism paradigm. These are the three broad philosophical frameworks that sociologists employ in their effort or attempt to understand phenomena in society. Let us take time and look at each of them briefly. We begin by structural functionalism as a paradigm, and I want to state that this is a framework for building theory that sees society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidarity and stability. It interprets each part of society in terms of its contribution to the stability of the whole society. So that when you talk about structural functionalism as a paradigm, it is simply inviting us to understand a society in the analogy of an organism which has its parts. For instance, the human body has its parts or systems: respiratory, digestive, excretion system, circulatory system, among others. So this paradigm is telling us that we need to interpret society in the analogy of the human body, so that society also has parts, or what we call systems. Normally, these systems are developed into institutions, which we call the family, the state, education, religion, and economy. These have been the traditional institutions. However, in recent years, society has also elevated media, sports, health, and medicine as separate institutions because of the complexity of the issues that they deal with. Again, within the state as an institution, there are debates as to whether there is need to separate the police and the military as separate institutions from the state. This again is based on the complex nature of crime, security, and law and order issues that this sub-organ of the state are required to deal with. In other words, these parts develop as society advances and new issues emerge that existing parts or institutions are unable to effectively address. From there, then, institutions emerge in society that are specialized in terms of addressing those particular issues. I wish, as I conclude with this, to state that each of these institutions, the ones that I mentioned, the family, the state, education, religion, and economy, they are specialized in performing certain tasks. These tasks help in promoting those institutions, but also contributing to the larger welfare of the entire society. I want to invite students to look at the slides that deals with these institutions specifically. For instance, we have a slide on the family, on the media, on the state, among others. They are quite helpful in terms of what we need to go through in order to understand what the institutions are and the major functions that, or the roles they play in society. Then we have what we call the conflict paradigm. And conflict paradigm is one that focuses on those forces in society that promote competition and change. Again, the theory argues that, or this paradigm argues that, the society is always in a state of perpetual conflict and competition for limited resources. And this paradigm employs two concepts or two terms that it uses to define the various broad structures that exist in society. This paradigm divides society into two diametrically opposed groups. We have the group it calls the bourgeoisie, which represents the upper class, the wealthy, and the most powerful. And then, on the other hand, we have the proletariat, which represents the lower class, the poor, and of course, the masses in society. This paradigm wants us or invites us to understand society in terms of the interaction between these two broad groups that exist in society. So that everything that happens in society, if we use this paradigm, we need to interpret it or interpret them in terms of competition and change. And it is competition between two diametrically opposed groups, the bourgeoisie, or the wealthy, or the haves, and the proletariat, who are the poor and the have-nots. Such competition exists, and this paradigm says that such competition is inevitable. It is inherent in society, and it's a perpetual and constant theme that characterizes all societies. The other paradigm is called symbolic interactionism. And symbolic interactionism is a paradigm that claims that society is composed of ever-present interactions among individuals who share symbols and their meanings. And this paradigm is directing sociologists to consider the symbols and the details of everyday life, what these symbols mean, and how people interact with each other in the context of these symbols. It also invites us to understand that people attach meanings to symbols and then act according to their subjective interpretation of these symbols. Therefore, this perspective gives a serious thought to how people act and then seek to determine what meanings individuals assign to their own action and symbols, as well as to those of others. When we use this particular paradigm, we are being told that ignore the various parts of society that exist. Ignore the two broad types of groups that exist in society as proposed by conflict paradigm, but focus on symbols that exist in society. Dressing, color of dressing, things like the marriage ring, things like the white gown during weddings, such things. What symbolism do we attach to ceremonies that take place during birth, during initiation, during burials, among others, or a graduation gown, or a flower that one gives to his or her lover during Valentine? What meanings do people attach to these symbols, and how do they interpret them? So this paradigm is simply inviting us to understand the small little things that exist in society that come in form of symbols, and how members of society interpret and use them in their day-to-day interactions. I want us now to turn our attention to the characteristics of a good theory. One of them is coherence and consistency. A good theory should have concepts that are both coherent and internally consistent. And by coherence, we mean the identification of concepts and the specified relationships among them must be logical and ordered and even integrated. And an internal concept theory is one that explains relationships with respect to a set of common underlying causes and conditions. Consistency, as far as theory is concerned, demands that concepts in the theory are carefully operationalized. This, by operationalization, we mean the process of relating a concept to an observation that can be measured using a defined procedure. For instance, if we use the term conflict in any given context, what meaning do we attach to that term? Is it the general or the conventional meaning, or does it have a meaning that is contextual? So theory, a good theory, is one that has concepts, one that has terms, and those terms are clearly defined, and their meaning within the understanding of that theory is properly explained, so that readers and scholars are not subjected to a situation in which concepts are used but their meanings are not properly defined, and even if they're defined, the context under which those definitions are given is not clear. So this theory, rather a good theory, is one that should be in harmony in terms of the concepts that exist and the explanations that also accompany them. The other characteristic of a good theory is that one of causality. And by this, we mean that theories should be causal in nature. This means that an independent variable is thought to have a causal influence on the dependent variable. In other words, if we change the independent variable, then we expect a similar change in the dependent variable. A good theory based on causality should demonstrate that a change in the independent variable is a necessary and sufficient condition for a change in the dependent variable. Sociological theories must be able to state scientific and observable relationships between variables, usually between the dependent and independent variables. When you talk about this theory in terms of causality, or when we talk about theory in terms of causality and the issues of variables, I want to invite students to the slide that talks about variables, where we have talked about the meaning of variables, the types of variables, and the relationship between independent and dependent variables. However, here, what we mean is that we must identify major issues that we seek to study. So any given theory must identify major issues that formed the building block of that theory and the relationship between those issues. That is what causality means with regard to theory. The other important characteristic of theory is that one of testability. Testability, which means that theory building is normally accompanied or accomplished through the testing of hypotheses that are driven from theory. Therefore, an empirically grounded theories must be able to posit clear hypotheses that are testable. When you talk about empirical grounded theories, it means theories that have been developed through actual field-based studies where information and data is obtained from primary sources. So what we mean here is that any claim or proposition that is offered in any given theory, it should be one where empirical data can be collected to provide evidence that indeed what the theory claims actually exists in real life. So all propositions that have been put forward by any given theory must be those that can be supported by empirically generated information. Otherwise, if that does not happen, then what then it means is that such theory would be seen merely as speculations that are not supported by any empirical information. And that case, therefore, it will not satisfy the requirement, and the rigor that the scientific community wants a given theory to have. So a theory must be tested. Again, I want to emphasize here that for those who may not be familiar fully with hypothesis, the null hypothesis, another type of hypothesis, I want to invite you to the slide on hypothesis. I have clearly explained in that slide what is meant by hypothesis, the different types of hypothesis, and the characteristics, as well as the functions of hypothesis. Kindly spare some time and visit that particular slide for more information on hypothesis. The other issue that I want to speak about is to do with the functions of theories. Sorry, I have indicated here as characteristics, but these are functions. One of the functions of a theory is that they suggest potential problems, and they also produce new investigative studies. In other words, when we read key arguments of a given theory, within it, we should be able to discern some of the problems that that particular theory is alluding to. For instance, if it is on theories of crime, the proposition in that theory will tell us that there are certain factors or conditions that predispose individuals' engagement in crime. And therefore, those conditions present the problems that exist in society and which predisposes individuals to criminal act or criminal conduct. And therefore, when we read the theory carefully, we are able not only to find an explanation as to why certain things exist the way they do, but also possible underlying factors that are contributed to such occurrences. So by understanding the causes as suggested by the theories, it's also possible for certain solutions to be found based on those particular causes that have been highlighted as being responsible for the occurrence of a given phenomena. The other issue is on prediction and linkages, also as a function of theories. Theories should be able to predict facts based on historical analysis and observation of social uniformities. Let me take the case of crime. For instance, a theory might explain that certain social factors or certain social forces in society could be contributing to crime. For instance, it might say that criminal conduct is likely to occur among individuals with a lower level of education, or certain types of crime could be conspicuous with individuals with a given level of education. Now, based on that, we might want to investigate educational trends in any given society or in any given research location. And if, for instance, we determine that enrollment levels in schools are declining, they are going down, and therefore we're likely to have a society in the near future where a majority of the population have not gone to school. And if there is a theory that probably explained that one of the reasons as to why crime occurs in society is because of low level education, assuming that was a proposition, and given that our study shows that majority of people are not enrolling for school, and therefore we are likely to have a huge population of people that have not gone to school, then it is possible based on that to predict that in future, that particular society is likely to experience higher cases of criminal activities, because the theory says that there is a tendency between not going to school and engaging in crime. And if a significant proportion of a given population is not going to school, then there is possibility that in future, because of lack of education, they are likely to engage in crime as a means of earning a livelihood. That is why we say that a theory can enable us predict about what is going to happen based on intuition, our analysis of historical forces, as well as observation of what is actually occurring in society. The other issue that is also a function of theory is to do with the guidance. That is, theory helps us or helped in guiding us, because a theory offers key arguments about a given issue. And based on those key arguments, we are able to discern issues that can be studied and those that cannot be studied. And through that, we're able to get guidance in terms of areas that can generate interest in terms of studies and those that can, so that we're able to pick issues that are researchable and leave out those that are not researchable. That, up to that point, we have come to the end of our discussion on sociological theories. That is an introduction to sociological theories. We have looked at the meaning of theory. We have also looked at what we call the philosophical paradigms that underpin sociological theory. We have looked at them briefly. We have also looked at characteristics of sociological theories, and then we have looked at the functions of the theories as they apply both in research as well as theoretical studies. Thank you so much for your time and for listening to me.